my daughter, and we do sort of a tag team. But she ran the in the city to surf yesterday and called up and said, "Oh, it's great, blah 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 blah," and she's sick. So anyway, and the reason we wrote this book together, she's a 27-year-old environmental policy advisor. She was at New South Wales at the New South Wales Parliament. She's now working in another job, and she has a background in law and history. But why we wrote this together was when she was about 16, she decided to go for a new hair care routine, which was very noticeable in the house, because she decided to wash her hair with bicarb soda and condition it with apple cider vinegar, and she didn't realise that you meant to dilute the vinegar. So she walked around the house like a sort of sauerkraut kind of ball, and as she says, that was really her own vanity. She wanted to grow her hair beautifully long, but in the pursuit of this natural hair care, she actually realised that a lot of people were using natural hair care products to reduce plastic. And she kind of went, because we were a sort of family that, you know, we joined Renew about 15 years ago, and we, you know, were very early adopters for solar. We had a water tank put in when plumbers used to laugh at you. So we did, actually I think we had our water tank put in the Millennium Drought. So we thought we were pretty good. We had Prius, you know, and we thought we were doing okay. And then we actually started to think about how much plastic we were using and where it was going. And having had a background as a foreign correspondent in Indonesia and seeing the build-up of the plastic pollution all over Asia, I spent 10 years working in Asia, and literally seeing waterways where it looks like, you know, you could walk on water because it's completely and utterly, you can't even see the water. I actually started to, you know, look a bit more carefully at what we were doing, and I was, you know, gaily throwing packets of tiny teddies in the lunch and wrapped muesli bars and, you know, festooning everything in plastic, and doing some research into where it was actually going and what was happening with it. And this coincided with a sort of shift in my own career, going from journalism to science communication, and I spent quite a lot of time working for the Centre for Sustainable Materials at UNSW as well, so that was kind of useful. So I guess the starting point for plastic, which is people are starting to realise, is it is absolutely everywhere. It's from the North Pole to Antarctica. I think that, you know, looking at the Mariana Trench, the deepest form on the planet, 80% of the plastics in the Mariana Trench are single-use plastics. And there's, you know, good reason for it to be everywhere. It's incredibly useful. It's incredibly durable versus, you know, compared to its weight. It's clean. It does, you know, it does all sorts of amazing things. But it also doesn't break down, and about a third of the plastic ever made is now in our environment. Oh, hang on, I think I did the wrong one. Sorry about that. I better do a bit better driving. So the history of plastic is actually really interesting, like the history of any type of science or technology. Its development was greatly accelerated by war. Plastics were first made in the lab probably in the late 1800s, then they were sort of around in the early 1900s, but they really rocketed into mass production following World War II. Interestingly, things like cling wrap, they came from, it was called sarin at the time. It was a coating on a fighter plane for World War II. So a lot of plastics were developed for the military. And they were seen as very, very favourable because they were lightweight and they took the place of metals in a lot of, and natural materials. So there was a feeling at the beginning of the kind of plastic revolution, and this could be quite an environmentally friendly material because it took the pressure off raw materials. So all those tortoiseshell combs, all the ivory, wood, cotton, all of the type of wool, all of the type of natural materials we relied on were actually under quite a lot of pressure. And plastics were cheap, colourful, durable, and everybody in every village in the world could get something in plastic, and that was really, really positive. So there was a sort of, I guess almost like a real culture shift from waste not, want not to waste lots, want more. And there was a great article in Time Life magazine, and this has sort of been, studied endlessly by, social scientists, but it's sort of seen as the beginning of the kind of wasteful society, the throwaway living. And so the whole point of it really was, the idea, it seems, was that humans had entered a kind of wanton golden age when cleaning up after ourselves was just one more quaint waste of time, and tossing more and more of our once-used items into the trash was another sign of modernity's relentless ascendancy over the drudgery of the past. So we actually made it, gradually started to make it really desirable to be able to just chuck stuff away. And that has become, I think, faster and faster as disposable packaging has been actually integrated into systems that we use. So when, for example, when there was pressure on the supermarkets to get rid of single-use plastic bags, I'm not making this up, I actually read an academic study that had found it would take 0.1 seconds more for the checkout operator to put a non-standard bag, so if you bring your own bag in, and this would affect the rate at which you could sell stuff out of your supermarket. Anyway, that's been solved. You have to check yourself out now anyway. So, but that was part of the barrier. So we have, plastic isn't just a really useful material. It's actually really, really tightly integrated into how we live our lives every single minute of the day, basically. So, okay, good plastic, bad plastic. When you think about plastic, it's neither, of course it's not 100% negative and it's not 100% positive. There's amazing things that plastic lets us do. A Dreamliner is 50% plastic, which makes it incredibly efficient for flying in terms of getting the fuel per passenger ratio down. Cars are between 20 and 30% plastic. PVC piping has, revolutionised delivery of clean water. There's so many uses of plastic that have been really, really revolutionary in terms of health and safety. So that's one thing. The real problem, though, is single-use plastic. The very idea of producing plastic items for use for an average of 12 minutes that can persist in the environment for half a millennium. Anyway, that's what we think anyway, is an incredibly reckless abuse of technology. So we also, and I'll explain why, encouraging individuals to recycle more won't solve the problem of single-use plastic. I'll get onto that in a minute. So the sort of headline figures, I guess, about plastic, which some of you may know, is we're at 8.3 billion metric tonnes of plastic per annum now. We're heading towards 34 billion on the very steep curve. Now, I was trying to figure out, what does 8.3 billion mean? Does this, what is this? And I found an equivalence it was a million elephants, but then I felt really sad because we've got less than a million elephants on the planet today, so I couldn't actually find an equivalent. So basically it's a gazillion amount of plastic. I don't know what that actually means. So what's actually happened to it is that only 9% of the plastic that we've ever made has actually been recycled. Plastic can be recycled. We're doing it very, very, very badly. And poor Australians have, I guess, dutifully washed out all their containers and put them in the bin with the yellow lid, etc., etc. The total recycling rate for plastics in the National Waste Report from 2018 was 12.8%. Huge amounts of plastic end up in landfill. About a third ends up in the environment. 12%'s been incinerated, which is one sort of quite popular potential solution. But as plastics are made from their byproducts of fossil fuel production, it's just one stage further on from burning fossil fuels. So essentially, it's not a great idea to make plastics out of petrol refining and then use them for 12 minutes and then burn them. It's a very similar process. So I guess where you can see the sort of the problem and the opportunity is nearly half, 42 to 50% of plastics are actually designed to be used only once, which is really sort of, I don't know, it's a pretty sad kind of reflection on humanity that we need half of the global world plastic, you know, just to be used once. And the top 10 sources of environmental waste are not so much cigarette butts in Australia, it's in Asia, cigarette butts, but totally. Cigarette butts, food wrappers, plastic beverage bottles, bottle caps, grocery bags, other plastic bags, straws, stirrers, takeout containers, plastic lids, and foam, styrofoam cups and things like that. So plastic gets into the environment because it's light and it blows away easily, and even with the best intentions, lots of bins, you know, as they're transferred, you'll get plastic leaking. The other issue, I guess, is microplastics, which we're starting to know a little bit more about, and I've been fortunate to work with quite a few of the scientists looking at this at UNSW. So microplastics just come from plastic breaking down. So all those plastics that go into the environment, they break down eventually into more bits of baby plastic, and it's sort of like plastic sand. Or you can get microplastics from washing your clothes. I don't know, does everyone know if you wash synthetic clothes, they shed microplastics? Interestingly, what the UNSW research found, they're expecting that most of the microplastics in Sydney Harbour would be from things like face scrubs and stuff like that that actually has, you know, used to have added beads. And it's actually the greatest amount is from laundry. So loads of synthetic clothes, I've got solutions, don't worry. They shed about 1.5 grams per garment as you wash them. And the thing about microplastics is we don't really know yet much about them. We know just in Sydney, a third of the fish in Sydney in harbour have microplastics. There was a great study, a global study of bottled water, and it found that 93% of branded bottled water that you purchase in plastic contained microplastics, and approximately double the amount of microplastics if you buy a bottle of water compared to tap water. It's much, much healthier and safer to drink Sydney water. And they've actually started to advertise that. I don't know if it's out yet, but they're actually starting to advertise Sydney water as being safer because of microplastics. What will happen to microplastics, we don't know. There was, the first study came out in 2018 that had found plastics in human feces. It was a pilot study in Europe, and they don't know whether it was ingested via plastic food containers or it's actually in the food. So in the UK, mussels have been found with plastic in them. So there's a lot of plastic entering the food chain, and we don't really know what it does, except that it's probably another endocrine disruptor, which is, you know, something that a lot of chemicals do to us. There was one small study, I have to say, in Melbourne that found a link between smaller penises and plastic, but that didn't really get a lot of publicity, I don't think. See, I thought that would be great for a plastic campaign, but anyway. So, okay. So, plastic in the environment. This is somewhere in Nepal. This is a place called Henderson Island, which is quite interesting. It's another Australian study. It's in the Pacific. It's unpopulated and it's a little tiny dot. And per square metre, it's the most polluted place on Earth in terms of plastic pollution because plastic travels. So even if you're busy soiling your own nest, it will affect everyone around you because plastic is light, it gets in the waterways, it goes everywhere. This is Bali. I don't know if you're aware of the garbage emergency that occurred in Bali. Bali lies within a current from Java, which is the most populated island of Indonesia, and the plastic pollution flows out and it comes down onto the coast of Bali. This, I think, is in Thailand. And so in Bali, it's been really interesting because they've actually instigated a plastic bag ban. And we've got some Balinese friends. I used to be based in Indonesia for the Herald many years ago. And they said that what's happening is that locals are actually dressing in traditional dress and standing at the markets and actually explaining to tourists the damage that that plastic is doing to their island. They'll lose their tourism if this sort of images go viral, so to speak. And that there's been a really big local push to clean up, and they've actually been really excited because all of the old woven bags are returning to the markets, and they're actually trying to engage people. And the other part of that is that's seen, and I've talked to Indian friends as well, seen as a sort of Western invasion plastic, which is, you know, I guess that's not really useful for the tourists either to be seen that way. So, okay, tons of plastic in the environment. Business as usual, not tenable. This is a bird, poor bird, you probably know this. The first seabird found with plastic in its ingesting plastic was in 1960, and we still haven't done anything really. I mean, we're amazing actually. We are just like this sort of situation. This is how plastic leaks. It doesn't mean that people didn't want to put it in the right bin, etc., etc. So, okay. So, what are we going to do? I think that the good news is that there is lots and lots and lots of ways of reducing your plastic footprint. I guess the question here I always ask myself is, you know, just doing this individually, is it going to make any difference? Blah, blah, blah. Slogging away, trying to change things. I do think it is. I think there's a very big movement of people doing stuff like this, and we'll go through to sort of talking about what industry is doing. So I do think that there is a point in doing it. You know, there's the usual thing, just say no. You know, what does it matter one straw said 3 billion people twice a day? Well, you know, all of that sort of stuff. Reduce, less or zero packaging, go naked. Reuse, so introduce reusables into business models, which I'll talk about in a minute as well. Replace, swap out plastic for another material. I've got lots to show you here. And recycle is really, at the moment, is really a very much a last choice. If you've got a plastic recycling rate of 12.8%, you've had contaminated containers of Australian plastic in Indonesia sent back, you've got it sent back from China. There's absolutely no excuse for us not to be recycling plastic properly. We have the technology, we know exactly what to do, we just haven't done it. By comparison, if you were to get a can and put that in your recycling, the metal recycling rate in Australia is between 80 and 90%, and the glass recycling rate and the paper recycling rate are over 60%. So you've got by far a better chance using those materials that they'll remain in the loop. Plastic at the moment is just kind of leaking out everywhere. So, okay. So what we've found, and my daughter's much better at talking about this because she's kind of young and connected, and I'm kind of old and just do my job, but that a lot of so much of everything is about your personal psychology. It's about sort of change, behavioural science, all that sort of thing. How is it that you change the way you do things? Because even if I know this, if I go to the supermarket, which I don't much anymore, but you know, I used to always go to the supermarket, if they'd move something, I'd be like, oh, where are the tiny teddies wrapped in plastic? You know, we're really not that good at changing. We're really used to doing things the same way over and over and over again. So when plastic first came in, people found it quite confronting, and they washed plastic bags and hung them on the line. When the first coffee machines came in offices with plastic cups, people washed them because we had a built-in taboo about waste. We now seem to have a built-in taboo about saving anything. We're just chucking everything out. So the systems we live in are really set up for us to be rushing, to be grabbing things off shelves. So in supermarkets, a lot of things are packaged so that you can get them more quickly. It takes more time for you to put apples in a bag than it does to buy 10 apples. You know, we upsize, you buy the big rice bubbles and then you waste half of it. So there's all of these things in our systems that encourage us to use plastic and make it really quite hard, I think. I do think it's quite a challenge to change. So our tips would be, plan for success. Take on what you are confident you can achieve. Don't just go, well, you can. If you've got a really, if you've got a really strong personality, you might be able to go completely cold turkey and go, I'm quitting plastic today. Find a friend. Doing something together is always more effective. Join an online waste community. Vote with your wallet. So believe in the power of consumers. So go to places that offer you some better packaging choices. Harris Farm's quite good. But there's a few more things coming in supermarkets. Don't stress. Everything that you do makes a difference. Pick up plastic. That's something that we do all the time, and it's a thankless chore. No one is ever going to give you a gold star even for this. We live near a creek, and the creek is near a school, and we have this kind of like, I think if someone did an archaeological dig around our school, they would find layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of the children's snacks. And I've talked to the school, and I'm like, so boring, but anyway. So, as it gets into the waterways, etc., our birds eat it. And the other thing is, please eat an ice cream. This is the best plastic-free snack you can have. If you think of it, there's all these foods from back in the day that we didn't get in plastic containers with plastic spoons. We made, falafel wraps. It's got bread. That's all you need. There's all sorts of things. Anyway, so if you want to make a big impression on yourself, nobody else will notice. The 4 biggest sources of plastic pollution in Australia are straws, water bottles, plastic bags, and coffee cups. So, if you just wanted to start today, you could go, okay, what's my consequence if I don't have my reusable cup? I don't get coffee. And that's quite, if you can stick to that, that is very motivating to bring your disposable, your reusable cup. If you just did those 4 things, that's actually a really big impact. If all of us did that, it would be absolutely phenomenal. Plastic bags, I think it was 1.3 billion for Woolworths and 1.7 billion for Coles just when they removed them. So you can just see the volume of plastic is kind of, I guess, fairly overwhelming. So what we've done in the book, apart from, providing you with a few psychology chapters about how to change and, how to deal with people rolling your eyes and things like that, is we've broken it down into different rooms around the house. There's lots of things like easy swaps. You can just get a butter dish and put butter wrapped up in paper and cut a little bit off, and it's suddenly spreadable butter. You don't actually have to get the one in the plastic container that says spreadable butter. There's, all sorts of basics you can get in paper, so you can get sugar, you can get flour, you can get all sorts of things that aren't wrapped in plastic in the supermarket. You can look for stores where you will go and get your fruit and veggies in your own bags, or these are compostable. This is a new generation of compostable produce bags, so they're introducing them in South Australia very soon. They're going to ban when you go to pick your fruit, there's those little green bags. They're about to be banned in South Australia. They seem to be doing everything in South Australia. And they also have the first factory in Australia of compostable bags, which I have quite a few of them here. That's quite a good idea. Understand the recycling hierarchy. So if you've got a choice between a plasticized foil and plastic pouch of soup or a can, get a can because it will probably be recycled. Local markets, and then we always think there's something in the too hard basket. For us, the thing that we find really difficult to get without plastic is cheese. We used to find yogurt very hard, but we have bitten the bullet and we make our own yogurt. We get our milk on tap, which is really fantastic. We're very lucky to have a store that has bulk organic milk in beautiful kind of metal churn sort of things with a tap. So we turn ourselves into the milkman, which is great. We still haven't worked out how to make cheese. One day we might be able to do that. So Now, the bathroom is, again, something that's really easy. That's what I use for my hair, which is a shampoo bar and a conditioner bar. Haven't used any shampoo for ages. This is what I use for deodorant, called No Pong. It's a deodorant paste. This is our refillable toothpaste, right? Bulk toothpaste. This is a refillable toothpaste container. And this is to, in honour of the little penguins at Manly, these ones. Okay, bamboo toothbrush. This is the other brand. This is from New Zealand. My husband gets this. It's called Dirty Hippie. This is a deodorant stick in cardboard. So a lot of bathroom products really just go back to soap, and all of the liquid stuff is just water added. We make our own liquid soap. Just get a bar of soap, cut a bit off, put it in a pot, let it dissolve into the water. Wait till it cools. You get this kind of, looks like a bit like a soap jelly. Get your stick blender out, and then you put it in a pump pack, and that's your liquid soap. Very easy. The other thing is you can make your own washing powder. You can use grated soap and bicarb soda, and then use the stick blender again, and then put in some eucalyptus oil. All these things are in the book. Really cheap, really easy, works really well. There's another. I don't know if has anyone been using soap nuts in their laundry? This comes from the subcontinent. It's a relative of the lychee, and it's a natural effect. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Sapotient. It breaks the surface tension of the water, so it basically isn't a soap, but it actually works. They're little dried kind of nuts, and you put it in this bag and put it in your laundry. It does actually work, and you can boil them to make cleaning products. What was really interesting, and the book is actually, I know it looks like a kind of little fun book, but it's actually a reference book with all the scientific studies. So if you actually want to know where we got this information from, all the studies are there as well. The thing that we were interested in was, this whole culture of 99% kills 99% of germs, that we use so many cleaning products that claim to, that we feel that we need to Dettol everything and wipe everything down with, these kind of antiseptics and things like that. And interestingly, in the same way that antibiotic resistance is increasing, there's actually microbial resistance increasing, because the 99.9% that are gone, the most resilient bugs in your house, are still alive. And so we went into a lot of the scientific research, which really shows that white vinegar kills about 80-something% of germs anyway. And there's a number of essential oils, particularly the citrus oils, that are almost as effective as the 99.9%. And some countries are reducing the amount of those, powerful disinfectants that you can sell for households, for the reason that you don't want people's houses to become kind of having the worst bug only survive. So there's lots of stuff about that. What about medicines? Our suggestion is basically don't mess with anything that is prescribed and needed for your health. Material science is very, very precise, so the way that your drugs are packaged will be for their longevity, so they remain active. So things like IV lines, it's amazing science. It's a type of plastic that then has impregnated into its surface antimicrobials, so that it prevents infection. People may all know this because you're very clever if you're in this organisation and probably know a lot of things. So but there's lots of stuff you can do in, just in removing the water from a lot of your personal care products. It's so easy to travel if you've just got little things like this. You can actually have a little travel kit that's about that big. And you're finding in Europe, I think Intercontinental announced it, they're removing all the little toiletries from hotels. So there's lots of things happening in this area. Okay, how will I line my bin? Well, things like this, we'll get to that. Okay, all right. So, what will I wear? Who are these guys? I don't know. Now, there is a reason for this. The reason I have this picture is that they are wearing something called Tencel, and Tencel is a biosynthetic. Instead of being derived from petroleum, it's derived from eucalyptus pulp, and it has I think it's a solvent that is 99.9% recovered. So if you ever see anything made of Tencel, that is actually a very sustainable material. But anyway, going back to the beginning, what will I wear? What's fast fashion? Does everyone know what fast fashion is? War on waste, you buy it, you wear it. It's a cheap, low quality piece of clothing that is designed to be worn no more than 11 times. And some people wear it less than 11 times before it's thrown out. And so the idea is to create a very fast fashion cycle where you are constantly accumulating and throwing out your clothes. That's caused a huge increase in waste, as you probably have seen if you watch the war on waste. Okay, what's wrong with synthetics? They're shedding lots of little microfibers. In the book, we had a look at natural fabrics. There's lots of new natural fabrics coming onto the market. There's an amazing one made by a PhD student in Europe from sour milk, because they have a big dairy industry in Europe and they didn't know what to do with the off milk, so make stuff out of waste. So it's another biosynthetic. So I think it's called MYLCH or something like that. Sounds, and then you realise it's made from sour milk, which is quite interesting. So, you know, I guess what we would say is buy well, buy once. My daughter at this point would normally just give me a hard time on having no fashion sense anyway, and it doesn't really matter what I buy. But I was such a sort of bowerbird. I guess I was so proud of having some nice jeans when I was at uni, because I didn't really come from a family that had a lot of purchasing power for clothes. That I kept them, and what was really funny is that those hideous high waist ones, we had to sort of lie down on the floor just to get them on. And they came back briefly into fashion when this particular daughter was at uni, so she actually wore my jeans to uni. Anyway, so you don't have to go that far, you don't have to impose upon your offspring your fashions, but I've kept a lot of clothes and my kids wear them. So natural fabrics, there's again in the book we go through this, you know, do you choose, it's really tricky because, you know, there's always a kind of, you know, there's, you've got to weigh things up. So cotton, yeah, great, if you wash that and it sheds, you're just shedding, you know, biodegradable fibres, but it uses, you know, 25% of all the pesticides in the world. It's using, if you're buying Australian cotton, the Murray-Darling's now dead. So bamboo, yes, probably a bit better, but is that putting too much pressure on, you know, panda habitats, etc., etc. Even things like, I bought these in because these shoes are actually 100% plant-based, I know. They do look like slippers. I have worn them out of the house, I'm sorry. So this is made from bamboo, the sole. This is made from wool, and this inner sole is made from castor oil. It's a New Zealand brand, so it's a kind of material science innovation, which is sort of fun. But anyway, this is a gym shirt, which is made from wool. So wool is pretty good. That's also from New Zealand. There's lots of very synthetic active wear, and if you still have your synthetic active wear and you don't want it to shed, oops, my arrangement isn't very good. This is a microfiber bag. I won't take it out now. You put your clothes in it, wash it, and it will capture the fibres in it. So they were actually invented by Patagonia, which which is a pretty sustainable brand. They're now made by quite a few other companies. This thing here is called a Cora ball that you put in your washing machine, and it's supposed to attract the fibres. I don't know what happens once it's full of fibres. I don't have that. I've got the bag, which is this one. So, you know, one of the chapters we've done in the book is really going through all the different trends in the development of materials, and, you know, you can be very boring like me and go and look at all your labels and just see, you know, is this going to be a good option? So, entertaining and eating out. Just eat in, that's really easy. Don't do takeout. Solutions for takeaways. Again, it takes a little bit of courage. We just go to our takeaway store with something like this and say, could you put it in there? Does anyone else do that for takeaways? Yeah. How do you find it? Do you find it friendly? No. Okay, all right. We started bringing containers to food stores many years ago, and one of the stories I remember was my husband just back here. We went to a local fishmonger, and I was always trying to engage the business in the conversation as to why I was bringing this, because they'd get a plastic bag. No, don't do, and they'd weigh it on the plastic bag, and then they'd throw the plastic bag in the bin, and we try to kind of explain that we're trying to cut down the plastic. And he says, oh yeah, I got one other guy who does that, and I realised it was my husband, that we're the only people doing this. We do have a very good Indian restaurant near us. These are actually from Tiffin box designs from India, so we take stuff like that, and they're really happy to fill it up. We've got lots of things like that. So again, I mean, you know, you're imagining, so you're on the run, you're going to come to a Renew talk via work, and honestly, you've got a backpack full of these things. You're going to have takeaway on the way. This is for your smoothie, should you want one. So, you know, I mean, I get it. It's a lot more difficult, but I have some solutions coming up. Kids' birthday parties. Fortunately, it is now getting cool to have a waste-free kids' birthday party, which is great. My older daughter has a 3-year-old. She has had a number of waste-free parties, which have been quite successful. You know, put drinks in those big glass things with taps on them. You'd have to do a lot of cooking. We've found that one of the things about being, well, as plastic-free as we can be, we're not 100% plastic-free, is that we do a lot of cooking from scratch. So we've improved our cooking no end. Cheese and crackers plate, very difficult if you're going to make your own crackers, but it can be done. There is a recipe in the book for easy crackers if you want to do that. Anyway, I think there's probably, go on to this. Okay, this is sort of, I guess, the next question. Are we being greenwashed? So what are you going to do when you're going to buy all this stuff? There's a huge amount of greenwashing happening in the market now. Degradable just means it will break down into lots of whatever it's made of. If it's plastic and it's called degradable, it will break down into plastic. It just means it will break down. That's all it means. It doesn't mean it's any good. Biodegradable means it will break down in the environment. Still plastic. So something like this, these things that are called plant-based bags, if you look at the label more carefully, they contain 20% sugarcane. So that means that they're using 20% less fossil fuels to make that bag. It doesn't mean that it's recyclable or it's any better, but it is a little bit less fossil fuels being used. This is also made from sugarcane. That's 100% sugarcane from the Eden Project in the UK. That is recyclable as a bioplastic. Then the other thing I think is kind of interesting is, does anyone know this brand, Earth? I did a job for the Australian Packaging Covenant and had to spend some time looking at what industry was doing. Now, this is made by the parent company is called Nature Organics. They make a number of different products. As far as I know, I think they're the only company that is making reasonably priced consumer products using 100% recycled Australian plastic pellets. So they recycle them here. They're not buying them in from lot of people buy them in from Thailand, and you can tell, they said, because their plastic isn't as clear as the ones that you get offshore, but they persist with them. So if you can't get something, you know, in glass or whatever, look for 100% recycled containers. Most of them aren't recycled. Nearly everything in the supermarket is virgin plastic, but there are starting to be some brands that are 100% recycled, and then, you know, get them back into the recycling chain. So this brand, or this parent company, they use millions and millions of pellets of recycled plastic, Australian plastic, going back into Australian containers, which is very good. Recyclable versus recycled materials. It's really funny where I think you pick something up and it says recyclable. It's almost like duh. I mean, is that meant to be good? But there are plastics that aren't recyclable, so then they're never going to go anywhere. The other thing, I guess, is to try and be aware of plastics in the supply chain. That's very hard to work out, like how many layers of plastic came with this. An example would be bonds. So bonds online, they when they manufacture their garments, the plastic hangers are incorporated into the packaging. So it's on the garment, then it's all packed up. So when you order it online, it goes to you with a useless, you know, those little plastic hangers. If you buy it in the store, the bonds person takes it out, puts it in the bin, it gets recycled. So they were trying to come up with a solution for that, because online orders were actually creating all this kind of, they're actually spreading the plastic hangers all over the place, and they're never going to get them back and never going to be able to recycle them. So they actually bit the bullet and hired staff to take the plastic out at the point of sale. So this is how complex our systems are. Like, we set up a system that is the most efficient way of selling clothes, and then we go, oh, online, what are we going to do? We have to hire more people. Well, good on them for doing it, by the way. Anyhow, okay, so cause for optimism, growing plastic-free single-use movement. You've probably seen bulk stores everywhere, The Source, Scoop, Naked, various co-ops. I know there's some in the city. There's an app for, it's in the book, Bulk Finder. So anywhere you go in the world, you can actually type in on your phone where you are, and we actually tried it in Norway, and it pointed us to the nearest, you know, bulk store. So it will tell you anywhere in the world, based on, you know, your location data, where the nearest bulk store is, where you can go and buy stuff straight into your own bags out of a bin with a scoop, or put it into your own jars, which is pretty good. And I think that a lot of this is also aligned with other sort of subtle social changes, even things like, you know, Marie Kondoing everything out, like simplifying how much stuff we have in the house. I think people are more thinking about spending disposable income on experiences rather than accumulating more kind of stuff. So I think there's some subtle changes happening, so that is a kind of good thing. So here's the question, right? Bioplastics, are they the silver bullet? Are we going to literally just maintain our convenient society but just have bioplastics made out of corn and things like that? Or are we actually going to change the way we do things? At the moment, bioplastics are really fantastic for food, because you can then, you don't clean them or anything, you just compost the whole thing. So that's a really good idea. So Qantas, there's a high fly, it's these guys, Portuguese airline, they did the first single-use plastic-free flight using compostables made out of anything from cardboard's compostable. I didn't have room to bring them. I've got these plates somebody gave me that actually made from pressed wheat bran. So if you really want to, you can eat them, but they're a little bit chewy. But, you know, there's all sorts of innovation. There's a coffee cup made out of it's like a biscuit, and it actually, I hate sugar in my coffee. This has actually chocolate in it. But if you like sweet coffee, but I think it only lasts about 11 minutes, so you've got to kind of... So there's lots and lots of innovations going on in compostables. The thing about Australia is we don't have a compostable waste management stream at the moment. Some councils, I don't know, hang on, does Liverpool have one? Compostable waste stream?
Liverpool does not have one, no, not at the moment.
Okay, so basically if this might be something we could all write to councils, if you had a FOGO collection, a food organics and a garden organics collection, all you would need to do is have a corn-based bag on a little container in your sink. You would be able to put all your biodegradable, your compostable packaging and biodegradable packaging and all your food waste together. It would go off to an industrial composter and it'll be back into soil, which would be really good.
Illawarra has started. Kiama has started it.
Yeah, a few have. And that would really change our waste management issues. It'd be absolutely fantastic. Compostables aren't much good if they're going into landfill because they're still going to be anaerobically...
The trouble with that, I've been to a plant that tried to do that out of Western Sydney. Yeah. And the issue is too often people put contaminants into them. Yeah. And so we're limited to what they can use that soil for.
Yes, of course, because then if it's got microplastics in it or something, they can't use it for agriculture. They can use it for things like embankments and stuff like that, but they can't actually, Correct. So it's all our fault. It's all just a management issue. So the solutions are actually there. So, there's some amazing compostable products, but it's also, the best thing you can do is just use less, which is, I think the same for most environmental issues. So is anything actually happening? Has anyone heard anything about this? Australia's 2025 national packaging targets, you'd be probably unsurprised to hear, is voluntary. This is an industry group that's kind of auspiced, I guess, by the government. And so the targets are 100% reusable, recyclable or compostable packaging by 2025, which sounds pretty lame, but there are, there's quite a bit of packaging out there that isn't recyclable. So Sheridan, for example, they package a lot of their sheets and pillows and things like that in PVC. Can't be composted, and they're actually getting it out now of their product lines. Then 70% of plastic packaging being recycled or composted, again sounds pretty low, target, or about 100, but we only do 12.8, so that's pretty good. 30% of average recycled content included in packaging, and then the phase out of problematic and unnecessary single-use packaging. I think what's interesting about the packaging targets is in the job I did for ADCO was talking to companies and how acutely aware companies are that plastic is becoming an image problem for them. Unilever, which as you may know, makes virtually everything. It's the biggest, Procter & Gamble and Unilever are the biggest sort of consumer goods companies in the world. Unilever in 2018, for the first time ever, introduced plastic as a business risk. They consider that plastic is actually a risk to their business, that they have to do something about plastic packaging, which is very interesting. And they also announced at the Davos meeting at the beginning of the year with Procter & Gamble and a few other companies a new sort of, I guess, idea called the loop. Has anyone heard about the loop?
Circular economy.
Yeah, what it is, it's a consumer good loop. So it's piloting now unfortunately not in Sydney. I don't know why they didn't choose Sydney. Of course, it's in Paris and New York. So what it is it's high quality stainless steel containers for branded goods. So you could get your Pantene shampoo in a stainless steel container. You could get your Haagen-Dazs ice cream in a stainless steel container. You have a sort of personal bag like, you might have had the milk bottle crate. So it's a combination of the old milkman and barcoding. So essentially you order online, you get your first go, you've got your containers with the things, because we're creatures of habit, we keep on reordering the same stuff. and then they pick it up once a week with whatever you've finished or, you know, whatever, and they refill it. So, you know, it's pretty elite, high-end service, I think, at the moment. But it's kind of interesting that those big companies are doing stuff like that. Sorry, you can ask me.
If you go to a hardware store or an electronics goods store, a lot of things are put in packaging for the convenience of the shop for hanging things.
Yeah.
And I find it kind of obscene, but is there any movement towards getting rid of that?
I don't know, because I think there's two reasons for that. So convenience of putting it there and hanging it, it's also it's the business proposition. They don't want you to buy one nail or two nails. They want you to buy, how many of us have like 100 size something nails, 150 size? You can't buy stuff in very small, I just want to hang one hook. You buy kind of, everything bigger is better, so it's that as well. I don't know, I've never seen a bulk store for stuff like that, because you used to be able to go in and just buy what you needed, right?
It's not necessarily true for earbuds, cabling, when that comes packaged. You're not going to buy
That's
buy
true.
them individually.
Yeah, I don't know, but what's I've found very interesting talking to industry is how sensitive they are to consumer pushback. So, I mean, being a pest and saying, you know, dear company X, love your product, but I can't buy it anymore because I'm going plastic free, or, you know, things like that. There's a number of online companies that sell a lot of this sort of stuff, and they were interesting to talk to too, because they have actually succeeded in saying, well, we are a portal, we've got, you know, 60,000 customers, our customers don't want that packaging, will you provide us that product without that packaging? And they've done it, so they've changed the packaging, so they've just put it on, you know, something like this, it's a bamboo toothbrush, it's just in a cardboard, you know, so there's no plastic. So there is a lot of pushback going on, there's groups everywhere, yes.
Is there a medical condition attributable to microplastics?
Not that we know of yet.
Because that would bring the industry.
Exactly. Well, the thing is that this is where the research is now going. I did an interesting job recently with the Nobel Prize winner for medicine, Elizabeth Blackburn, who got the Nobel Prize for medicine in 2009. And her view on plastic, I thought was very interesting, is that we don't yet know how it affects us, but you would A, never heat anything up in the microwave in plastic, and B, try and avoid food in plastic, because we don't know yet. We don't know yet what's happening. I don't know what it, you know, if we eat fish that's full of microplastics, you know, what's going to happen. But
you have to go looking.
They just don't know yet, basically. I mean, they've only just found, it's only recently that they've actually discovered microplastics. So it's sort of, you know, it's kind of an evolving, we've got so many environmental Armageddon nightmares to worry about. I mean, you know, plastic as well. Anyway, so that's, yeah, so there is quite a lot that's happening in industry, particularly in the food area. You may have seen changes, you know, airports are removing plastic bottles, some airports. San Francisco airport's banned plastic bottles, and they're putting in all the stations so you refill your own bottle. Craig and I did a trip recently to Europe and wrote about it for the Sydney Morning Herald, trying to travel plastic free, which was very interesting, getting on an aircraft with this and just saying no, and you know, and it was actually good. Everyone was really fantastic. Qantas was really good. However, we did find ourselves at you know those really depressing service stops on the M something in the UK, and it's 3 o'clock and you haven't had lunch, and you're like, okay, do we eat the 3-day-old quinoa salad in plastic, or do we just not eat anything? And we ate the salad, of course we did. Anyway, so it's not perfect, but yeah, there is, you know, there's a lot of things that you can do. Here's a few names of stores that might be quite useful. Oh, I better hurry up because I'm talking too much. And I just wanted to end on a really, what I think is a hopeful note. Has anyone heard about the Versova Beach cleanup? It's a biggest cleanup ever in the world. Now, it was started by one guy. It's in Mumbai, or what used to be Bombay. And so this is what it used to look like, and that it doesn't really do the rubbish justice, because when they did the cleanup, they did it with earth moving equipment, because it was layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. So they cleaned it all up, and then 5 minutes later, oh my goodness, it's covered in plastic again. So they found that they had to go up to all of the waterways that were running into that beach, and they had to work with the communities. It took 2 years. I'm sorry about the resolution, it's not very good. This is what happened. Anyway, in the end of last year, the turtles came back for the first time, which was absolutely awesome. I mean, can you imagine how happy that would make you in that city? They're called Olive Ridley turtles. I guess Olive Ridley must have found them and named them, but they hadn't been there for ages. And, you know, that sort of thing is really awesome. So the positives of reducing plastic, I would say, are eating better, shopping differently, so shopping in more markets, smaller stores, having more conversations, talking to people, feeling healthier, I think, avoiding plastic, having no rubbish to throw out, pretty much. Anything more, Craig? No. And we did it as a family, and I'm sorry my daughter's not here, because it's actually quite... Our daughters have left home now, but and they're kind of like, I guess, you know, little eco warriors out there, and they sort of compete a little bit, you know, as to who's having less plastic in their life. But anyway, so yeah, they kind of, you know, live pretty well. So yeah, it's a really great thing to do, so long as you don't get completely overwhelmed. And yeah, if you want to follow us on Insta, it's not me doing the Instagram. I have no idea what this is about. So we are on Instagram at the Quitting Plastic Guide. And if you want any do-it-yourself recipes, there is something. So anyway, I've talked too long. Is anyone good?